Welcome to your custom deep dive. Today, we are taking the stack of research you sent us on houseplant care and answering the ultimate question. What are your plants actually trying to tell you?
Which is a great question, honestly,
Yeah.
because they are definitely communicating.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
When you are driving down the highway and suddenly that little yellow check engine light pops on the dashboard, there is this immediate sinking feeling.
Oh, yeah. Pure panic.
Right. It is a universal symbol that something is wrong, but it is also incredibly vague. Like, it tells you there is an issue, but you still have to open up the hood to figure out if it is a major catastrophic engine failure or if, you just forgot to tighten the gas cap.
Exactly. And our houseplants have their very own version of the check engine light.
Yes, they do. So, we are taking a fascinating look at the secret language of plants today, specifically decoding what it means when their leaves start turning yellow or getting those crispy brown edges.
It's so common.
It really is. So, using the comprehensive guide you shared from the Garden Tips channel, our mission today is to equip you with the diagnostic skills to stop blindly guessing. We want to help you become a fluent speaker of plant stress.
I love that phrase. And the foundational principle we really need to establish right off the bat from your source material is that discoloration is simply a distress signal.
Okay.
When a leaf turns yellow, your baseline diagnosis should always be simply the plant is in stress. It is waving a flag.
Just a big yellow flag.
Yeah, exactly. The challenge, and really the art of being a successful plant parent, is playing detective to uncover the actual mechanical or biological reason behind that stress.
Because our first instinct is usually to just panic, grab a watering can, and flood the poor thing.
100%. It's the classic panic response.
But before we start tearing plants out of their pots, we need to eliminate the simplest explanations. And some of these, they actually require zero intervention on your part.
Yeah, well, natural aging is a perfect example of a false alarm. I mean, a plant is an incredibly efficient system.
Right.
As it grows, it will actively cannibalize its own older foliage.
Wait, cannibalize?
Basically, yeah.
Huh.
It pulls mobile nutrients out of the oldest leaves, the very bottom of the stem, and redirects that energy up to the canopy to push out new growth.
Oh, wow. That's pretty wild.
It is. And once those bottom leaves are completely drained, they turn yellow and just fall off.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if I'm a beginner and I see a yellow leaf on my favorite monstera, my alarm bells are ringing loudly.
Sure, naturally.
So how do you confidently tell the difference between a naturally dying old leaf and a dying plant? I don't want to just ignore a symptom until it's too late.
Right, that's fair. You look at the distribution, a stress-feeling plant will generally exhibit symptoms systemically.
Meaning like all over.
Exactly, all over the plant, or specifically on the fragile new growth at the top. But natural aging is highly localized to the bottom.
Yeah.
If it is just one or two of the lowest, oldest leaves turning yellow while the rest of the plant is vibrant, the plant is simply shedding dead weight.
Got it. So sometimes shedding isn't a sign of failure, it's just efficiency.
Exactly.
And that concept of shedding for survival applies to changes in the ambient environment too, right? Because the guide mentions how aggressively some plants react to temperature swings.
Oh, for sure. When ambient temperatures drop significantly, the certain species essentially go into a biological lockdown.
Like hibernating.
Yeah, they enter a state called winter dormancy. The source highlights the adenium plant as a classic example of this.
Right, the desert rose.
Right. When it gets cold, the adenium will systematically yellow and drop all of its leaves. It shuts down all non-essential cellular functions to conserve energy. It basically ends up looking completely dead.
Which is terrifying if you don't know what's happening.
Very. But it is just sleeping, waiting for the ambient temperature to rise again.
Okay, so if the temperature is stable and it's not just a single old leaf at the bottom, we have to look closer at the surface of the plant for external threats. And we are talking about tiny invaders here.
Sucking pests. They are a major biological stressor.
Ugh, just the phrase sucking pests makes my skin crawl.
I know, it's gross. We're talking about aphids, mealybugs, white flies, thrips, mites.
All the usual suspects.
Yeah. They physically breach the surface of the leaf and drain the plant's fluids.
Basically tiny vampires.
That is exactly what they are. And they effectively starve the localized tissue of moisture and nutrients, which predictably causes those specific leaves to turn yellow and fail.
The idea of hundreds of tiny bugs draining the life out of a plant is so unsettling. But I do appreciate that the source provides a strictly organic defense plan.
Right. Nobody wants to spray poison in their house.
Exactly. We don't need to deploy harsh chemical pesticides in our living rooms. Neem oil is the hero here.
Neem oil is fantastic. It works by interrupting the life cycle and the feeding abilities of these insects. But, you know, the efficacy all comes down to the application schedule.
Okay, so how often are we supposed to use it?
Well, if your goal is preventative, like keeping pests from ever establishing a colony on your plants, the source recommends a light spray once every 15 days.
But what if you walk into your living room and realize there is already a full-blown aphid party happening on your pothos?
Yeah, then the biological load is way too high for just a biweekly spray. You must increase the frequency
To what?
to once or even twice a week. You are essentially suffocating the active infestation until the yellowing stops and the colony is completely eradicated.
All right, so if there are no bugs draining the fluids and the temperature is comfortable, we have to transition from visible threats to the invisible environmental factors that might be quietly starving your plant.
The silent killers.
Yes, let's look at sunlight and soil chemistry.
Sunlight exposure is a really delicate balance of cellular energy production. I mean, if a plant is placed in a dark corner, the biological engine basically shuts down.
It can't photosynthesize.
Right. It simply cannot perform photosynthesis properly.
Mm.
And without enough light to produce chlorophyll, which is the pigment that makes leaves green, the entire process halts and the leaves fade to yellow.
But you can't just fix that by blasting every plant with maximum midday sun either.
No, definitely not.
The source notes that overexposure to hot, direct sunlight is the primary reason the tips and edges of leaves turn dry and crispy brown.
Yeah, the plant tissue is literally suffering from thermal damage. It is sunburned.
Which means your first job is identifying the specific evolutionary needs of your plant.
Right, exactly. A species that evolved on a shaded jungle floor is going to burn instantly in a bright south-facing window.
Right. And I absolutely loved the practical tech hack the source shared for this.
The phone app?
Yeah. We've all bought a plant at the grocery store where the tag just says beautiful foliage.
Which tells you absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all. But the guide suggests using the free Google Lens app on your phone. You just snap a picture, the app identifies the exact biological species, and you can instantly research whether it thrives in deep shade or direct sun.
It entirely removes the guesswork. It's a great tip.
It really is.
But once you have the ambient light dialed in, you have to look at the invisible chemical environment below the surface, which is soil pH.
Okay, getting into the chemistry.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that even if your potting soil is packed with expensive fertilizers and organic matter, a high soil pH, meaning the soil is too alkaline, can cause the entire plant to turn yellow and starve.
Wait, if the soil is literally full of food, how is the plant starving? What is happening underground?
It all comes down to the chemistry of absorption. Nutrients don't just magically float into the roots, they have to be dissolved in water.
Oh, okay.
Most houseplants require a slightly acidic soil pH, right around 6.5.
Which is pretty specific.
It is, because that specific acidity level keeps vital minerals in a dissolved, available state. If the soil becomes too alkaline, those minerals undergo a chemical reaction. They basically bind together into solid compounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the plant roots physically cannot absorb them.
It's like trying to eat a bowl of soup with a fork.
I love that analogy.
Right. The nourishment is sitting right there in front of you, but the physical mechanics of getting it into your system are completely compromised.
Exactly. The plant is sitting in a buffet of nutrients, but its roots are locked out.
So how do you fix it?
Well, utilizing a simple pH testing gadget gives you a read on whether your soil leans acidic or alkaline. That allows you to amend the soil, reverse that chemical lockout, and make those nutrients soluble again.
That lockout concept perfectly sets up the physical lockouts that happen beneath the dirt, too. Because sometimes the restriction isn't chemical, it is spatial.
Oh, yeah. Root binding.
Let's look at what happens when a plant is root bound.
When a plant remains in the same container for years, the root system continues to expand until it hits the plastic walls.
Right, it runs out of real estate.
Exactly. And having nowhere else to go, the roots start circling inward, layering over each other until they create an incredibly dense, impenetrable web.
And the guide explains that this dense web essentially chokes itself.
It really does.
The roots are so tightly packed that water and oxygen can't penetrate the mass. So the plant stunts its own growth and the leaves turn yellow because the delivery system is failing.
The obvious solution is to pull it out and perform root pruning or repot it in a larger container.
Right. But repotting is necessary, and yet the physical act of untangling and moving those roots creates a secondary issue, doesn't it? Transplant shock.
Moving a plant is a major surgical procedure.
People don't realize that.
They don't. When you pull a root ball apart, you are inadvertently ripping millions of microscopic root hairs. And those hairs are responsible for the vast majority of water uptake.
So you are trying to save the plant from choking, but the surgery itself traumatizes the system, leading to immediate wilting and yellowing.
Yeah, it's tough. But the source lays out a strict recovery protocol to mitigate this.
Okay, what do we do?
First, keep the newly potted plant in the shade for a week.
Why the shade?
You want to slow down its metabolism so it isn't trying to aggressively photosynthesize while its roots are repairing.
Oh, that makes sense. Give it a rest.
Exactly. And second, you water it thoroughly with an Epsom salt solution.
Okay, I have to ask for specifics on this Epsom salt remedy. How much are we actually talking about here? Because I do not want to accidentally pickle my fern by just dumping a cup of bath salts into the watering can.
Yet don't do that. Precision is critical here. The recommended dosage is 5 to 10 grams of Epsom salt per liter of water.
5 to 10 grams per liter. Got it. But why Epsom salt?
Well, Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate, and magnesium is the central atom in the chlorophyll molecule.
Oh, wow.
Right, so by providing a readily available hit of magnesium, you are essentially handing the plant the exact building block it needs to repair its energy production system after the trauma of being uprooted.
That is amazing.
And you use this mixture just once after repotting.
Just once. Okay. Now, that instinct to help our plants recover often backfires in other ways, right? Especially when we try to force them to grow faster by overparenting. Let's look at fertilizer overuse.
Oh boy. Newbie gardeners frequently fall into the trap of thinking more fertilizer equals faster, bigger growth.
Guilty.
But dumping excess nutrients into a confined pot creates a highly toxic environment.
It's the classic mistake of thinking that if one multivitamin is good for you, taking the whole bottle will make you superhuman.
Exactly.
It just creates a biological crisis.
It really does. Overusing concentrated chemical fertilizers, specifically things like urea, DAP, or synthetic NPK granules, literally burns the plant tissue.
Chemical burns on a plant.
Yes. Excess fertilizer salts in the soil alter the osmotic balance. They actually pull water out of the plant roots.
Wait, really? It reverses the water flow.
Yeah. And the visual clues for this chemical burn are very distinct. You often see a strange, highly unnatural pattern where the veins on the leaves remain dark green, but the tissue in between turns bright yellow,
Oh, wow.
or the very tips of the leaves look scorched and crispy. You might also see a sudden, complete drop of closed buds or fruit.
And the source specifically notes this is predominantly a danger with chemical fertilizers, right? Not slow release organic ones.
Right.
So if you see green veins with scorched yellow tissue, immediately step away from the synthetic granules.
Very good advice. We've seen how adding too much chemical fertilizer creates a toxic environment, but the absolute most universal way we inadvertently harm our plants involves the most basic resource of all, water.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting. The ultimate paradox of plant care comes into play here.
Oh, yes.
Because when you say improper watering, most people assume you mean simply forgetting to water the plant. But the reality is far more complicated than that.
Much more complicated. The number one driver of yellow leaves is moisture stress. But that stress is triggered by both overwatering and underwatering.
Okay.
Overwatering fills all the air pockets in the soil, which suffocates the roots and causes them to rot. Underwatering simply deprives them of fluid.
So it's two extremes causing the exact same visible symptom.
Right. In both cases, the root system fails and the leaves turn yellow.
But the guide gives us a crucial, reliable distinction here. While yellow leaves can mean too much or too little water, brown leaf tips or crispy brown edges almost universally indicate the plant is suffering from a severe water deficiency.
Yes. If the edges are dry and brown, the cellular tissue is desiccated. But the trick here is that a water deficiency doesn't always mean you are forgetting to water it.
This is the part of the research that is so counterintuitive to me. You could be pouring water into the pot every single day, and the plant could still be dying of thirst.
Exactly.
So how do we diagnose what's actually happening in the dirt?
Well, the first diagnostic step is tactile, the finger test.
The glass.
Yep. Dip your finger 1 to 2 inches deep into the soil. If it is bone dry beneath the surface, you simply need to water it.
But what if you touch the soil and it is soaking wet, yet the leaves are still turning crispy brown?
Then you have a severe texture issue.
It's not a lack of water, it's a lack of access.
Precisely. If your potting soil is too rich in clay, it becomes incredibly dense when it's wet.
Like mud?
Worse, it acts like cement. It wraps around the roots so tightly that they are physically constricted. They cannot expand or uptake the moisture that is sitting right next to them.
Wow. So adding more water to a clay-bound plant doesn't quench its thirst, it just drowns the constricted roots.
Exactly.
And the guide has a brilliant, gentle hack for fixing this.
Mm,
If you pull a plant out of its pot and find the roots encased in a hard brick of clay, do not try to break it apart with your
no,
hands.
don't do that.
Yeah.
You will tear the root system to shreds.
Right. Instead, submerge that entire clay root ball into a bucket of water for a few minutes. The water slowly dissolves the clay, freeing the roots without physical trauma and allowing you to repot it in loose, well-draining soil.
Which is key. But understanding what will draining actually means requires a simple test.
Okay, what's the test?
Well, an ideal potting mix, which is usually a blend of garden soil with organic matter, coco peat, perlite, and vermiculite,
Mm.
it needs to hold on to enough moisture to feed the plant, but immediately let the excess flush out.
And the guide offers a highly quantifiable drainage test for this. When you thoroughly water your plant, that water should naturally start dripping out of the bottom drainage holes in about 1 to 2 minutes.
Right. If the water pours out instantly, your soil is too sandy. It has no retention.
Okay.
If it takes 5 to 10 minutes, or the water just pools on the surface like a puddle, your soil is far too dense and heavy. That guarantees root suffocation.
To use an analogy, planting in sandy soil is like trying to carry water in a leaky bucket. It just vanishes before the plant can drink.
Right.
And planting in heavy clay is like forcing your plant to try and drink from inside a solid concrete bunker.
I like that.
You have to manufacture that middle ground with perlite and coco peat.
You do. But there is another scenario where the soil is perfectly balanced, the watering schedule is flawless, but the plant is still suffering from severe water deficiency.
How does that happen?
This occurs when the root system itself is structurally diminished, perhaps from rot or aggressive damage from a trowel during repotting.
Right, so the root mass is suddenly too small to support the sprawling foliage up top. And the solution the source provides for this is wild. You actually have to cut the top of the plant to save the bottom.
It sounds crazy, but think about the biological balance.
Okay.
A plant maintains a specific ratio of root mass to leaf mass. If the root system is physically halved by damage, it cannot possibly uptake enough water to hydrate the massive canopy above.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The remaining roots will exhaust themselves trying. By proactively pruning the plant's branches and reducing the foliage, you drastically lower the plant's overall hydration requirements. You are taking the massive biological workload off the struggling root system, buying it time to regenerate.
It makes perfect sense when you view the plant as an interconnected hydraulic system. Less output required means the input engine can recover.
Exactly. Now, there's one final watering issue that causes those brown, crispy edges, and that's mineral and salt buildup.
Right. Over time, watering plants with heavy hard tap water or relying too heavily on synthetic fertilizers leaves behind crystalline salt deposits in the soil.
Which is bad news.
Very bad. These salts disrupt the osmotic pressure, making it difficult for roots to draw in water. The fix here is a heavy flush.
Yes.
You take the pot, ensure the drainage holes are unobstructed, place it in a sink or outside in bright sunlight, and flush massive amounts of soft, filtered water through the dirt. You are mechanically washing the excess salts out the bottom.
It is essentially a detox flush for the root zone.
It is. And before we move to the final overarching diagnosis, I really want to highlight the source's golden rule of thumb.
Oh, it's a good one.
It is pure common sense, but critical to remember. Generally speaking, indoor plants, which are trapped in pots with less evaporation, are vastly more prone to being overwatered. Outdoor plants, exposed to wind and sun, are far more prone to being underwatered.
Yep. Let that dictate your first instinct before you reach for the watering can.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the ultimate diagnosis. The condition that synthesizes everything we have discussed regarding restricted roots, alkaline pH lockouts, and improper watering.
Nutritional chlorosis.
If it isn't pests, it isn't winter dormancy, and your watering schedule is flawless, this is the final boss of plant stress.
It really is. Chlorosis is the physical manifestation of severe nutrient deficiency.
Okay.
When a plant lacks the ability to uptake major macronutrients like nitrogen or vital micronutrients like iron, manganese, and zinc, the production of chlorophyll fails.
Now, what does that look like?
This creates incredibly unique symmetrical yellowing patterns on the leaves, often leaving green veins against a yellow background or causing the newest growth to emerge completely pale.
You know, as you look back on this entire diagnostic journey, it is amazing to see how deeply interconnected these systems are.
They really are.
You might have a plant suffering from iron deficiency chlorosis, showing those pale yellow leaves. But you cannot simply dump an iron supplement into the pot and expect a miraculous recovery if your soil pH is sitting at 8.0.
Exactly.
The alkaline soil will just act like a bouncer at an exclusive club, entirely blocking the roots from ever letting that iron through the door.
That's a great way to put it. The roots might be too constricted by heavy clay to physically reach the nitrogen, or the root hairs might be destroyed from transplant shock.
Right.
Chlorosis is rarely just an empty soil issue. It is almost always the final, visible symptom of poor environmental engineering.
Like poor drainage, bad pH, or damaged roots.
Exactly, finally taking its toll on the plant's biology.
So, what does this all mean for you looking at a sad yellowing plant in your living room? It means a yellow leaf is not a death sentence. It is an invitation to investigate.
Yes, don't just throw a cup of water at it and hope for the best.
Ugh, please don't. Check the basic moisture with the finger test. Assess the lighting with your phone. Look closely at the soil texture and run a drainage test.
And, as you investigate those variables, it raises an entirely new level of appreciation for what these organisms are capable of.
It really does.
We have explored how incredibly adaptable plants are. I mean, they drop their leaves to survive freezing temperatures and deep dormancy.
Right.
They cannibalize their own old tissue to push new growth. They endure chemical lockouts and root suffocation. Makes you wonder.
Wonder what?
Well, if a plant survives a massive months-long drought or endures severe root binding before finally being repotted, does it retain a physical memory of that trauma?
Oh, wow.
Right. Does a plant that survives severe stress alter its cellular structure or genetic expression, permanently changing how it will react to the next drought a year from now?
The idea that the pothos sitting on your desk might actually harbor a cellular memory of the time someone forgot to water it for 3 weeks, that entirely changes how we view these living systems in our homes.
It really does. They aren't just decorations. They are highly communicative, reactive
They
organisms.
truly are. So your mission today, go give your houseplants a close look, use your new detective skills, check under the hood, and see what they're trying to tell you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.